Hi there guys, welcome back to F1 Updates. Today we have a pretty exciting video for you concerning a rule change that might change Formula 1 as we know it. If you've been following Formula 1 news, then you've probably heard that the FIA is looking to ban tire blankets starting in 2024. In response to the FIA, Lewis Hamilton has come out to criticize what he believes are the dangerous new F1 rules that could endanger the lives of the drivers. The seven-time world champion slammed suggestions to outlaw tire blankets, calling it a pointless endeavor. The restrictions are being reviewed as part of a cost-cutting measure by the FIA. The energy-consuming blankets help to preheat tires to provide better grip on the track, but it comes at an immense electricity cost. Hamilton is one of the few drivers who's tested the new Pirelli tires without first warming them up. Based on his test drive, he believes the drivers hitting the tracks with cold tires could lead to a number of fatal crashes. Let's take a closer look at what tire blankets are and how they can affect the execution of the race. Electric blankets are usually used in Formula 1 to preheat the tires before bolting them to the cars. This concept is not particularly new to the sport. It's been in place since the mid-1980s, but in recent years there's been talk of banning the tire blankets to reduce energy consumption and save vehicle costs. The main opposition to banning these tire blankets has mostly been the safety concern that cold tires can pose to the drivers. If a car starts a Formula 1 race at full speed with a cold tire, this can lead to the car locking up and being unable to turn. If something like that starts to happen in Formula 1, then of course we can expect a whole lot of crashes. Before you say that it might not be that serious, you should remember that even with the tire blankets in place, drivers and teams have still complained about being unable to get their tires into the proper working range. In some circuits, drivers have to purposely take their outlap really slowly just to get their tires up to speed. Now, if they're already doing that, just try to imagine how Formula 1 would look when the tire blankets are gone. This warm-up time of one lap could now extend to 2 or 3 laps, not to talk of the already significant danger to the driver of the vehicle. Looking closer, it's hard to see any advantages to this strategy because the impact on the overall race time and race strategy would be too large for it to make any sense. Let's take a look at some of the specifics. In 2021, the FIA introduced a maximum tire blanket temperature of 100 degrees Celsius for the front tires and 80 degrees for the rear tires. This number was dropped to 70 degrees Celsius for the front tires and rear tires in 2022. But there were plans to lower the temperature to 50 degrees Celsius this season, but those preparations were scrapped when drivers expressed their worries during a trial run in Austin last year. Ideally, the FIA hopes that this drastic drop would help prepare the teams for the 2024 season when the tire blankets would be completely banned altogether. This idea to ban the tire blankets has sparked a lot of controversy, and it's still being hotly debated among the Formula 1 higher-ups. While it could easily be possible that the FIA changes its mind and decides to keep the tire blankets for the 2024 season, no one can say anything for sure. Pirelli, the official tire supply for Formula 1, is thinking about changing the fundamental composition of the tire for the 2024 season. The idea here would be to introduce tires that have more grip naturally without having to be preheated. This idea is still pretty far off in the distance, so we can't hope for anything really concrete as of yet. Just to give you an idea of how bad this plan can get, let's look at how tire blankets could impact race strategy. The preferred race strategy over the last decade of Formula 1 has been the undercut strategy, which is the foundation of most teams. In F1, an undercut is one of the most common strategies used by teams to gain track position, particularly in the age of Pirelli tires, when races generally have 1 or 2 pit stops. Any Formula 1 driver or constructor will tell you how important pit stops are. An effective pit stop strategy can help you win the race and vice versa. With the current Pirelli tires, practically all races are 1 or 2 stops, therefore eliminating the earlier 3-stop pit strategies that added additional complexity to an F1 race day. Now, what exactly is undercutting? Undercutting is when a driver pits a few laps before the vehicle in front of him. This means that the driver has a fresher pair of tires, which can enable him to pass his opponent's worn-out tires. The lap times are faster, and the drag reduction system can assist in overtaking if he's within 1 second of the opponent ahead. When this occurs, it's normal to expect the opponent to make his own pit stop. The opponent would also seek new tires, but if the margin is large enough by then, he may end up trailing the undercutting driver. It's a hard maneuver, but if executed correctly, it may win the driver important track positions. Undercutting can also backfire if the opponent has a good understanding of the strategy. Because the undercutting driver pits first, he's racing on more worn tires. This will eventually result in a loss of tempo and grip on the opponent. This allows the latter to reclaim his lost track position if he races well enough. When this happens, overtaking becomes a huge job because the opponent has newer tires with better pace and grip. The entire game revolves around track position. After you have a track position edge over your opponent, you can try to use your talent and psychological advantage to your benefit on the track. All the same, worn-out tires near the end of the race can be detrimental. Undercutting is common, not only while racing against opposing team drivers, but also when competing against your own. Everything is dependent on the team's race strategy and philosophy. Mercedes, for example, has the policy of allowing both Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas to race against each other. This permits their individual race engineers to use undercutting whenever they see fit. But if the tire blankets are really banned in 2024, then this strategy would die out completely. Instead, teams might consider using the overcut strategy more. A driver performs an overcut in Formula 1 when he stays close to the car in front and drives an extra lap or two when the car in front enters the pit. The goal is to catch up and build up a lead before your own pit stop and then go out in front of the previous leader. Overcutting is not the most used strategy in Formula 1 races these days because it is heavily dependent on a number of factors like temperature, tire performance, and the type of track. However, with the tire blanket ban, it seems all teams will be forced to revert to the strategy. This blanket ban is putting pressure on everyone across the board. Pirelli Motorsport director Mario Isola is not ruling out the possibility of the tire blanket ban being put on hold for another year. The idea behind the ban that is due to come into force in 2024 is on the grounds of sustainability, particularly with F1 aiming for its zero carbon footprint by 2030. There are grave concerns, however, that the tires being developed by Pirelli that will eradicate the need for the blankets won't be ready in time for when a vote is due to be cast following the British Grand Prix in July. The clock is ticking for Pirelli to get its product right, with a handful of tests planned over the following 4 months before a conclusive decision is reached. Do they have enough time? Well, in Formula 1, you never have enough time. Isola has confirmed that if the tires were not ready to support a ban and Pirelli required more time for development, then it would request a delay until 2025. If the request is supported by tangible evidence, then most likely the FIA would grant it. Hopefully, the new tires released would be safe enough to meet the high standards of Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. Hamilton isn't alone in his worries about the tire blanket ban. Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc also feels that a blanket ban is unnecessary. He stated that for the time being, he does not believe Formula 1 is in a position to outlaw the tire blankets entirely. You can't help but agree with these seasoned racers who've put in the time on the track. Leclerc thinks there's still a little bit of work to do, especially with the warm-up of the tires before they hit the track. Both Leclerc and Hamilton are gearing up to challenge for the championship in the coming season, and because of this, they have to keep their eyes out for any potential problems. Meanwhile, after the conclusion of F1 testing in Bahrain, Hamilton had mixed feelings about this year's Mercedes car. He stated that it's impossible to properly sum up the W14's performance. They may have had a couple of rough days in the past, but the testing in Bahrain was very challenging. To him, it felt more like a struggle getting the car to perform the way he wanted to. Right now, the bouncing issue that the previous car had is pretty much gone in the W14. While this is a pretty major step for Mercedes, there are still a worrying number of underlying issues that they have to work through. The F1 season kicks off next Sunday in Bahrain, and Hamilton says it is still too difficult to know where Mercedes sit in the pecking order. Hamilton claims that some of the balance limitations that they had last year are present, even though Mercedes is working really hard to get through them. There are even rumors that they may have an entirely new backup car if things don't go well for the W14. If you're interested in finding out more about the backup car, then you can check out our last video. We really went into the details of what the car looks like. For now, it's important that Mercedes keeps its focus on the finish line. The tire issue might come into play later, but focusing on their car should be their greatest concern. Or, what do you think? What exactly might be the greatest challenge Mercedes will face this season? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and we'll see you next time, guys.